somebody at the grocery store that you just stop to talk to. You hear someone talk about these behaviors that their husband or boyfriend is exhibiting, and you can pause and say, my sister, just be mindful. This and this and this is maybe what is happening right now. Get help. So, not all assaults are part of an ongoing pattern, as I said, that results in gaining power and control over the partner. However, it must be noted that at the center of domestic violence is the need for power and control. And, as I read the word, it brings me back to the enemy. And that is Satan's ploy. It has been from the beginning, the need for power and control. And when I read how in heaven war broke out because the enemy, he was not then, he was light, he was Lucifer, right? He was all of that and more. But how he used the need for power and control and became Satan in the end, right? So it is similar to what is happening a lot of times, even in our Seventh Adventist Christian homes, where sometimes a partner is needing to usurp more power over, and not looking at that as what Satan did. So it's time for us to now start linking these things, these behaviors, to scriptural things. All right, so we move right along. We were talking just now about the physical. So we're going to now go into the example of physical. I'm just going to skip a slide or two here. Does anybody have a question of anything that has been said thus far? You can unmute and speak your question if you have any burning question. Okay, so let us move on. Perpetrating domestic violence is a chosen, learned behavior of the DV perpetrator. Let me say that again. Perpetrating domestic violence is a chosen, learned behavior of the perpetrator. And I say that because it is written from research that was done. And it is also, as we just talked about Lucifer, how he chose to behave in a manner that he became so violent towards God that he had to be kicked out of heaven. We are seeing even children learning these behaviors from their fathers. And I say fathers because that's the stats that show most of it come through the father being violent towards their wives. But that does not mean that only men abuse. Just a few years ago, I had a client, and there was violence in the home, severe violence, so much so that police had to intervene, and he was arrested and charged, etc. And he had to leave the home. The 12-year-old, he was 11 and a half at the time, going on 12. And he was mimicking his father's behaviors very closely. Just last year, she called me. And by this time now, he was over 16. And she called asking for help. Why? The 12-year-old then, who has now grown up to be a teenager, well into his 16, going on to 17 years old, was doing what? Exactly what dad was doing. Slapping her, spitting on her, coercing her to do things that he wanted her to do. When she didn't have money, he would say, yes, you need to get me this, 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 whether it be the shoes, the tablet, the games for his video games, and etc., etc. So he was doing exactly now what dad was doing. Dad is no more in the home because mom could not take it anymore. She's given him several chances. He came back and then left, came back, etc., and was being abusive. Now this teenager is doing this to mom. My question to him now is, what's going to happen when mom is not there anymore? It's going to go to his wife or his partner, right? And that's what we call that cycle of abuse that continues. That cycle, because the boys, the little boys in the homes, are learning that it's okay. That's how a man behaves in the home, right? He usurps his power and he behaves big and bad and he beats up mom and he slaps her around and he tells her what to do and when to do it and how much to do, etc. And the little girls are learning, oh my goodness, is this how I am going to be treated? I better start learning how to take it. I better start learning how to give over of myself and be less than. I better start learning whatever it is I'm seeing my mom being and doing. Okay? So when we see this happening to men, unfortunately, we need to take a look back at what happened to them when they were boys, right? So when we look at what happened to them when they were boys, we would get a better picture of where they're coming from. And I always maintain that no matter how abusive a father, a man, a husband, a boyfriend gets, he still is a person who needs help. He still is a person who needs support as much as mom does. Because for me, throwing him out of the house and telling him don't come back is not it doesn't solve the end it all. It doesn't solve all of this. He's going to go on to another woman, and I've seen that, unfortunately, where when I look through files I can see history. Oh, he was with this woman and that woman, he had a child with this one, and he's abused them all. I've had to go to homes to tell moms, watch out for their little girls because of abusive behaviors their now boyfriend has exhibited over the years towards women and children. So it's something that we have to continue that courageous conversation. It's, what do we do now as Christians? What do we do now? What do we do now as pastors, as elders in the church? What do we do? Not leaving it up to the social worker in the world or the counselor in the world. It's what do we do as a church to support each other? Because it's a problem that we've seen internally. Okay. So as we see here, these are some of the types of physical. We're going to look, we talk about types today. We're going to look at physical, the number one that we see and hear about. But it's not always the number one. When we check into the crux of the matter, this is exhibited after certain things, and we are going to go through all of the types. But this is a lot of the ones that women talk about, the physical, the pushing, the hitting, the biting, the restraining, hitting objects, slamming doors and slapping and choking and punching walls. I'm tired going to homes, even Seventh-day Adventist Christians' homes, and see walls being punched out. Why? Because the husband got angry and didn't want to punch his wife one more time. So he punched a wall, he punched a door, he punched something. And the children are there seeing these repeated behaviors. And that's why we say modeling is what we are doing for them. And hence the reason why they're becoming who they are today a lot of times. And very common, this is the use of using weapons or objects also. So just take note of some of the types of physical abuse. And then we have sexual. Sexual is not one that a lot of our women talk about, because oftentimes I hear, but he's my husband, so I have to. It's only yesterday I was talking with a woman, and she was talking about how it makes her feel when her husband tells her that she must. You must because you're my wife. And she does not feel as though he's doing anything to support whatever is happening in the house, but she feels like this because that's all she is. She's his slave. She's his slave physically, sexually, financially, and otherwise. So then what's the purpose of saying I'm a wife when this is how I feel? So sexual abuse happen even within marriages and even within Christian marriages. Okay. Then we go on to the big one. Oh, let me talk a little bit about sexual abuse there also. I had there pornography. Even asking the wife to watch pornography with him, and the wife may say, no, I don't want to, or to engage in pornographic behaviors because he is watching pornography and thinking, well, it is something that my wife should do. I see these people on the screen doing this, this, and this. I think my wife needs to do those things too. So that in itself too is just absolutely wrong. It is wrong biblically, morally, and it is wrong by the law. Okay, so always take a note of those things, how they link themselves together: the spiritual, the physical, and the moral. Okay, all right, so let us move on to what does the Bible say. It says in Ephesians 4:29, the Message Bible, it says, watch the way you talk. Let nothing foul or dirty come out of your mouth. Say only what helps, each word a gift. Watch the way we talk to each other. Husbands, watch the way you talk to your wife. Wife, just watch the way you talk to your husband. Say only things that would uplift each other. And let us move on to the emotional. What it is not. Emotional abuse is the normal what it is not. It is not the normal conflict between two people. People need to have their own opinions and the freedom to express them. We know this from a biblical perspective because we know we serve a God who does not say you must, you have to. He gives us that freedom of choice. And hence the reason why Lucifer was kicked out of heaven, because he had that choice. He had that choice to do good. The 1/3 of the angels had that choice to stay in heaven, but they chose otherwise. So that's the choice we are talking about. So what it is an intentional dominance dynamic used to gain power. And there's that word again, power, to keep the other person under control. So power and control, we see, is at the center of violence, of domestic violence, as we're talking about. And Ephesians 4, in the New King James Version, it says, let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. Husbands, are you saying things that would impart grace to your wife? Wives, are you saying things that would impart grace to your husband? Ephesians 4:29 again. Speech and or behavior that is controlling, derogatory, punishing, manipulative, or it can be insulting and attempting to scare, isolate, or control, or absolute part of the emotional abuse that a lot of women experience. When we see, when we hear these about the speech and the control that comes with it, there are times that women would say, I just thought he was talking to me like that because he loved me and he wanted to make sure that I stay on the straight and narrow. And I'm thinking to myself, but you're not a child, you're an adult, you're a big woman. But it's part of the power and control that comes out also. And one thing we did not put in there because I forgot to insert it, but it's coming, this is coming more from the Eurocentric approach, but we know sometimes even the look, right? A woman may be in church and her husband sees her talking to other sisters, or she's going off to women's ministries to chat with other sisters, and he looks around and he gives her the look, and she humbly comes and sit back down by his side. Just the look. And I don't know if that is in the Ghanaian community too, but I know it came from Africa with us. It came from Africa with us because we had that look, whether it be our grandparents who gave it to us in church or mothers or fathers, but it has come now to where husbands are giving the wives the look and they know what that means. When you get home, it's me and you. You better come and sit back down here. So indirect methods of control, withholding love, communication support, and the finances, which is a big piece also. Passive aggressive behaviors, that is covert hostility, and that could come in form of the look. Direct methods of maintaining power can be dictating where you go, to whom you talk, as I was saying earlier, spying or stalking. I know of a client of mine who recently was stalking his wife up and down, even though the police told him you cannot be in certain feet from her or meters from her. He was stalking her up and down and he couldn't help himself. She went to her sister's home and he followed her there. And when she went down and think, well, just the family was there, he came into the house and was there also with them, which is a scary situation. So the stalking is a big one that sometimes men do not respect even after they are being charged. Invading personal space, your personal space or belongings, going into your personal things and looking through, hunting to see who do you have as your friends on social media, who do you have as your contacts on your phone, who do you have written down in your diary, what do you have in your diary written down, etc., all those things. And the New International Version has another version of that same text. It says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building up others according to their needs. I like this. Building up others according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. So if you know what your wife, your husband needs, and you only speak words that would help to build that up, it would be beneficial to that person and ultimately be beneficial to the family. All right. So among Seventh-day Adventist adults in a study that was over 10,000 people, they reported experiencing emotional abuse. And this was done, I took this from the Seventh-day Adventist information that was on the ended now 2019. And they said that children under the age of, by a parent before the age of 18, they had experienced emotional abuse. 39% of females in the study and 35% of males in the study stated that yes, they experienced emotional abuse. Exposure to this abuse had a negative impact on their physical and mental health, regardless of their age, gender, income, or lifestyle choices, healthy eating or exercise, which is part of their lifestyle change. Just to speak a little bit on that, I have seen where men, adult men, would revert back to their childhood stage when certain things are happening. That's because that certain things have not been dealt with before, and the emotional impact that they have endured almost became traumatic to them. Not almost, it was traumatic to them, and they've never addressed it. So then at this age, as grown men, they are still behaving, a lot of men that I've come in contact with, still behaving like little boys when certain things happen. In our community, in the Black community, I know for a fact that most of my Black fathers, if I say, yes, I hear you, and I would like or recommend that you do some therapy, some counseling, immediately it go like light bulbs go off for them. Oh, you're telling me now that something is wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with me. So for men in our community, Black men especially, getting help to talk about childhood trauma is something, it's like pulling teeth for them, because they don't believe in it. They don't believe in it. But it is something that we have to come to the understanding and realization that trauma have occurred. It has occurred for us generationally. Coming down from slavery, trauma has occurred in our race. So because of that, it is something that we need to address. When trauma has occurred, whether it be historically, family, a lot of trauma have occurred in family. When you hear of the incest in family, when you hear of the abuse in family, my great-grandmother abused my great-grandfather, abused my whomever, abused my grandmother, abused my mother, abused, and now as a mom, I'm finding myself doing similar. As a dad, I'm finding myself doing similar to generations gone before me. So that's trauma. And that's something that needs to be addressed. For our women, it's a little bit easier because we are more open to saying, okay, I will. I see I need help and I will get some help. But we are encouraging our men. So women's ministries work on the men's ministries and help them to see how important it is to get some help in addressing childhood trauma, because it is real. Okay, so the psychological, and I'm harping on the psychological and the emotional abuse because it is something that is almost buried within our communities, and we don't talk about it as much. If a husband hits a wife and she goes to the pastor with a black and blue eye, he can see it and he can address it. But if she goes and she says, pastor, I think my husband is belittling me and he's doing this to me and he's doing that to me, and I'm being emotional abused. A lot of our congregations would smile or chuckle or even dismiss that conversation. But if it is physical, they would see it more. If it is emotional, psychological, even financial, they may dismiss those things. But it's something that we need to really address, because what we're seeing as social workers is that the multi-layered is happening, so much so that more women are now ending up having mental illnesses. I'm working with a mom, worked with her for the last few months. I left to go on vacation. She was fine. I came back and now she's in the mental asylum because of the pressures of life. And when you talk about the trauma that she has experienced throughout the marriage and prior to that, et cetera, multi-layer. So that is causing a lot of mental breaks in women, and women especially. I say women especially because Oftentimes when the abuse happens and men leave or is being asked to leave by the police, mom is the one who is there to settle everything, control everything, manage everything, to now be the driving force behind everything. And because of that, uh, some mothers are saying, I can't take it anymore. It's too much pressure for me. And then there comes the mental health breakdown. So these are just a few stats and figures as to what is happening in the two genders when it comes to emotional abuse. And as I said, women do abuse their husbands, but sometimes not in the same manner as men do. Okay? But we see a lot of times where women are, for example, there's one part here that I just wanted to highlight. Uh, I just wanted to highlight something here. The rate at which men and women experience psychological aggression is almost identical. And maybe it's not on this slide. Maybe it's the next slide. Oh, here it is. Yes. So the similarities are that they are often called names. Both men and women call each other names. That's very common. Being required to report their whereabouts, that a lot of times more in women. The difference for women is that women report more often, being required to report their whereabouts, as I just said. Men are often more insulted. So women, be mindful of that. How do you speak? And that's why I started out with those scriptures about our mouth, guarding what we say to each other. Most of the times, that psychological comes in the way of being insulted towards our husband. Also, they reported witnessing their partner becoming so angry that this situation seemed dangerous. Okay. Violence impacts everyone. And because today's presentation is a bit more lengthy on the different types of abuse and stuff like that, I won't go towards, I will not go towards the impact on the children. I won't talk about that until the next session, but that is as equally important to us for us to look at. Psychological abuse is real and leaves lasting consequences. The scars of psychological abuse may heal, but the scars of emotional abuse cannot be seen and can take longer to heal. Emotional abuse can destroy one's self-worth and result in shame and low self-esteem. There are times when I would speak with women who have been abused, and they would say, I prefer if he had just hit me or pushed me. But the things he said to me now makes me feel like this, like I'm not even a person, like I don't even exist. So please, men, please, women, sisters, brothers, be mindful what we say to each other, because words are very long lasting and can cause a lot of scars, emotional scars and trauma for life. Okay. And here we go again on emotional abuse. An emotionally abused person often feels insignificant, like I just said, and invisible, which can leave long-lasting scars. I'm reading my notes ahead of time. Physical abuse says, you are not worth it. You're insignificant. And emotional abuse says, you do not even exist. I don't even see you. I spoke with a mom just recently, and she said, I could be there speaking to my husband, and he tunes me out. I feel like he does not even see me. I feel like he doesn't even hear me. My children would say, Oh, dad, mom is saying something to you, and he'll acknowledge them and dismiss me. So just be mindful of that feeling that comes with being emotionally abused. Here are some signs. So some of the signs of emotional abuse is could be the physical signs: clenched teeth, the pounding of the heart, feeling that a normal conversation is a personal attack. If one is feeling that way, then something is happening. Because fortunately for us, that's how God created us, right? That when we either flee, or we take flight, or we freeze. So if somebody is abusing you at that moment, you want to either take flight or you freeze. Your heart begins to pound faster, like, you can't even think anymore, and you're feeling like, oh, something is about to happen. So common behavioral signs in the victim can be constantly apologizing. So the person who is now being abused constantly says, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And I hear that all the time from abused women. Miss Greta, do you think it was my fault? What do you think I did? Do you think if I was different, he would have been different to me? And I always have to say to women, do not take responsibility for your spouse's behavior. This is what emotional abuse does. It makes women feel so belittled that they now start blaming themselves. They start now attacking themselves, even sometimes I see, for what has been done to them. Constantly feeling the need to change things about himself or herself to accommodate the other persons. What can I do? How can I be different? Maybe I need to go out and buy some more night gowns that are different so that my husband would feel different towards me. And all the different thoughts that start coming into women's head. And if it's a man, the thoughts that come into his mind because he's now feeling less than. So emotional abuse can be very severe. And that's why I spent a little bit more time on it. And again, we go to the New Living Translation, and it says, don't use foul or abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement. And we see that word encouragement over and over, encouragement to those who hear them. Ephesians 4:29. So here's an emotional abuse self-test. So is your spouse or someone else you know behaving like this? Number one, he or she wants to know what you're doing at all times and wants to be in constant contact. You leave out the door. And, I used to say to my husband when my boys were living at home, if anything happens to me at a client's home and I don't come home, my last son would be the one to find me, because my husband, he never calls unless it's at a certain time of day or to ask a certain question. What's for lunch on Sabbath? Or what are we doing there? So just to check in, that constant checking in. I say, well, but then that's not a bad thing either, because then if he was constantly checking in on me, I would be worried, wanting to know, well, why? What am I doing that he needs to know? If I am at the grocery store, if I'm in front of the grocery store door, if I'm out in my car, if I'm here, there. No, that is too much. Then you start thinking, what is happening? Demands for password to things like your telephone, email, social media. I've seen women who have they have no control over any of these things. So when when and if their husband, say, was arrested and charged and out of the home, now they have to work with victim services to have their phones reset, get a new phone, get off social media, get passwords for banks, get this change, get that change. Why? Because their husbands had control, or boyfriend had control over everything. They had no control. If they had a phone, it was linked to his phone. They have a tablet, it's linked to his tablet. If they take a picture, he knows that they've just taken a picture of me and my dad, me and my mom, or me and my friends that's from school, high school days, and that becomes an issue, right? Oh, who are these and where were you? No, I wasn't there. Oh, really? And the evidence comes out. Why? Because everything is linked to his. So be mindful of those little things. Okay. Acts very jealous. Your husband or your wife or your boyfriend or girlfriend acts very jealous, including constantly accusing you of cheating. I see that a lot of times in a lot of my clients. Where did you go? Who were you with? Oh, you were with that guy again. Which guy? Oh, I don't know. You tell me. Right? And the conversation starts now, and the accusations start. Prevents or discourages you. He or she prevents or discourages you from seeing friends or family. This is a big one. And this comes with the isolation that happens in the cycle of abuse. No, you can't talk to your mom today. I will tell you when. No, you can't have friends. You can't keep friends with A, Y, and Z. I will tell you why. I will tell you if you can speak with her. As for that guy friend you had in university who was really helpful to you, you can't talk with him anymore. And we hear these continuous things happening. Acts of jealousy. Prevents or discourages you from seeing friends. Okay, tries to stop you from going to school or work. I have had moms who, why aren't you going to school? Oh, my boyfriend said I shouldn't go back to school. He has a bachelor's. What do you have? I have a high school diploma. So why doesn't he want you to? He just doesn't want me to. Maybe he just, he's just looking out for me. Anybody who's looking out for you would want better for you, wouldn't want less for you. So to say, no, you shouldn't go to school and get a master's or go on to do a PhD or whatever it might be, or even get a high school diploma if you've fallen out of school for a long time, that is part of the power and control. Then he or she gets angry in a frightening way, a way that frightens you. So when I've heard where it's oftentimes reported in severe domestic abuse, the guy, especially the man, gets so angry that my children and I now start to have to hide, because we know that that is the beginning of something to come. So we talked earlier about the emotional that is linked to the physical. So when he starts getting angry and you hear the shoes thumping upstairs, you're downstairs, you hear the shoes thumping and you hear the door slamming or anything, you know that we better start hiding because something is about to happen. Okay? So those are some of the little things that you can look for in, it's not the full list, but it's just a mini list of some things in the emotional abuse section. Then we look to economical. Before we go to economical, do we have any questions on the emotional abuse?
Good afternoon. Yes, I have one question.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone.
See any?
Okay, my question. My question.
Okay.
Hello.
Let's move on to economical.
Hello. Good afternoon.
For example, these can be controlling family funds, and as I said,
hello. Good afternoon.
The father or the mother, but a lot of times what I've seen is Daryl has total control of all the funds in the home.
Hello.
I have a mom who recently said, all I was getting is the child tax benefit, And my husband told
Sorry,
me that.
Greta. Sorry for a minute. I think somebody has a question, and it's somebody has a question.
I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now? Someone has a question.
Okay, go ahead. I can't hear you.
Okay, Auntie Pat, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Can
Good
you hear
afternoon.
me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. My question in relation to the emotional abuse. Now, can the person who is being emotionally abused become physically abusive, sorry? Can
Right,
the person who is being emotionally abused, that person is being pushed beyond the limits that they in turn around and become the physical abuser?
right. And that person sounds just like my sister. Amen. Yes. So that's a good question. So you're asking, if I hear you correctly, if that person who was being physically abused can being emotionally abused, turn around now and be physically abusive towards their abuser.
That's correct.
Yes. And we don't see it a lot of times as physical abuse. The link is that emotional trauma that that person has experienced and continue to experience over time has caused him or her now to react or respond in that way. It is not that it is the right way, and we're talking about a Christian woman here, a Christian man. It is not the right way too, but we have seen that a lot of times where that person now responds in this manner. I can't take it anymore. You have just pushed me over the edge. And then that response becomes either emotionally abusive or a lot of times physical. So you are correct. We have seen that.
Thank you.
You are quite welcome, Sister Giovanni. And economical, as we see here, we see a lot of control happening towards the family funds. And I was going to talk about the child tax benefit. Um, when I heard that a dad was saying, your income is now the child tax benefit, but it's the income for the home. I can't wait until I have a conversation with him to let him know child tax benefit is not the family's income. It is money that the government gives to children to ensure that they have a better life, right? Or if they want to save it towards their school education funds or whatever, but it's not a household income. So for him, that's a part of the power and control being enacted, where he's saying that you now have to take this money and spend it in the home because it is our household income. That's not it. Stealing, misusing money, sabotaging victims' efforts to work or gain education. Those are very critical, and those we see a lot of times, especially the sabotaging of the work. We see men who say, well, okay, you can go to work next week, and I will stay with the children in the morning and then come home at certain time, then I can go to work, etc. And then he gets up in the morning and he leaves. So guess what? She's not able to go to work now, and because of where she's working, she doesn't have that flexibility to say I'm working from home, or I'm going to call my employer to say that I'm taking the day off or personal day or whatever. No, she has to now say, well, I can't come into work. Do this one more time, guess what? You're fired. So then that's that constant, whether it be the linking of the economical, the physical, the emotional abuse that happens in homes, unfortunately. So financial abuse is often accompanied, as I said, by the psychological and emotional abuse, sometimes leading to physical. There you go, Giovanni. Neglect of the victim's basic needs, food, shelter, medication, and clothing is frequently evident in cases of financial abuse. You can't have a new dress until I say. If you buy a new church hat, I'm going to make sure you take it back to the store because you weren't entitled to have one. However, this is a mom who's working, but dad is saying she can't have. So just linking those just lets you know the power, the dynamics of power and control that happens in the relationship. Financial abuse is found across all ranges, economic, ethnic, and educational backgrounds. Now, for the fun part, who am I? And I alluded to it earlier, but I know a lot of people would listen to these sessions and say, oh, yes, like I started out, oh, yes, that happens, but not in Adventist homes, not in Christian homes, not in my home, but just be mindful that the perpetrator, and this is written by, in our own Adventist Review by Ada Garcia, and she says, victims of violence come from every walk of life, every class, every ethnic group, every age bracket. And it's not a new phenomenon. It has been around for decades. It's pervasive and concerning. It's a pervasive and concerning social issue. And if I may add, spiritual issue also. It is not, gender-based violence is not only happening in certain sectors to certain children, to certain age group, it happened to young people also. So young people, if young people are on the line, if women's ministries, you have young people in your department, remind them that this is not something that happened to your great-grandmother or great-grandfather and grandmother and or your mom. It can happen to our young people because we see that it is happening as well. And it can happen, as I said, to men. So it's not just women who are on the receiving end. Men sometimes are on the receiving end. And then it can happen to any class. We heard of Rihanna, who was abused violently by her boyfriend, Brown, a few years ago. So celebrity or not, and it can happen, as I said, to every class. Police, I've had over the years clients who are police officers, and not just police officer on civilian, police and police. So imagine as a Black woman going into a home of 2 white police officers to talk to them. That was trying. I asked my supervisor, why did you guys choose me to go talk to these people? But got to do what you got to do, right? So police officers, I've had doctors, nurses, lawyers, school teachers, social workers, you name, and I've had a pastor. I've had a pastor. And we are reminded that domestic violence or intimate partner violence doesn't happen to just one culture or the other. It happens across the board. We've had different cultures, people from different places in this world, in Canada, who experience and are experiencing domestic violence. And remember, it can be your coworker. So that's why I said the conversation should not stop here. It should be the beginning, because we never know who that person is who is on the receiving end. And remember, your smiling pastor at church, sorry, pastor, it's not you I'm talking to, but that smiling pastor at church could be the pastor who is abusing his wife when they get home. I've seen it. So don't think that because my pastor is wonderful. I spoke with a client just a few months ago, and she said, my husband goes to church and he is perfect. And when I told a couple of women at church that he's abusive, they said, nah. They looked me in the face and said, nah, you're not talking about our brother. We don't believe you. Why? Because when he goes there, he's a perfect man. Hello, how are you? Oh, lovely to see you. And he's hugging and kissing everybody. But at home, he's the demon. He is a demon. So just be mindful when we say to people, no, this is not happening to you. Because what does that do? It shuts that person down when he or she wants to come forward and say, I need help. 3 out of 5 of the most incidents reported to Peel Regional Police are family, intimate violence, partner violence. And we've seen that more and more in thank you. We've seen that more and more in the we've seen that happening more and more in the region where more reported violence are happening. And as I started out earlier by saying that Peel Police have seen an increase. Last year, they saw an increase in death. Just imagine if there's an increase in death of women in Peel region, just Peel region, in 2019, how many more are undercover? So how many more homes in just this region are experiencing abuse and people don't know? I've had women who would say to me, oh, no, don't tell my husband anything, please, 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 he will kill me, right? So these are women who are crying out for help, but they're saying if he knows that we're reporting, then he would really kill me. And then, as I said earlier, power is at the center of domestic violence, power and control. I want to be big and bad in my home, so I'm going to usurp my power any way that it means. I would coerce, I would intimidate, I would emotionally abuse you, I would isolate you, I will use the children against you, and I will be economically abusive towards you. No matter what it takes, I am going to be at the center. So that power and control wheel is very important for us to keep looking at. And okay, here we go. But we know that there's a different power, and it is called the power of God's word. Isaiah chapter 43 verse 1 says, I have called you by your name, you are mine. The power of God's word for us is because you and I were created in his inmost being. He knitted us together in our mother's womb. We praise you because we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Oh, your works are wonderful. I know that full well. We look at Psalms 139 verses 13 and 14. We are fearfully and wonderfully made, and we are not here to be abused. And let us say this together. Let us say this together. We're all on mute, but we're going to say together. I am God's hand and feet in this world. I represent God's love and healing power. I am called to treat others with love and respect. By this, all will know that I, say your name there, Greta, your name, I'm a disciple, that I have loved you if I have loved one for another. So just remember, we are called to be God's disciples, but we are called also to love. Let us go. I am called to be an agent of healing and support. Finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8. We have been called, and I'm going to replace we and just put yourself as I. So refer to yourself as by your name. Greta, whatever your name is, come on. Greta has been called to end violence now. And this was put together, some of the slides, and as I said, I edited most of them, but they were from the End It Now series by the General Conference 2019. And that's your first part of this 3-part series. And now I'm going to take questions. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I am going to take questions. So any questions or comments?
Okay, so before we go into that, thank you.